farts.
Every time we boot up a game, we do so with the intention that it triggers something in us. Sometimes it is enough for us to enjoy the simpler things, to bathe in nostalgia, to remember what it was like when times were simpler. But usually, we want to be offered something that surprises us, or even inspires us. Games can sometimes feel stale, because not every title we look forward to ends up giving us the feeling we were expecting. Whether we are the type of gamer who takes a deep dive into the abyss that is the indie gaming landscape, or we get fully infected with the next AAA hype game, we have the same goal: discovering something completely new and fresh. Something we have never played before, something greater, something bigger. I think the deepest need of a gamer is to constantly experience new things, because every time we boot up a game, we want it to make us feel something. Something we've never felt before. Unless you are one of those who's been stuck on Minecraft since 2011. Then I have to ask you, what's wrong with you, kid? But seriously, what if I tell you there was already a game out there for years by now, in the infinite vastness of the numerous eShops, that could satisfy your urge to play something extraordinary, maybe even revolutionary. Something that leaves dusty formulas and bad habits behind. A game that marks a step forward, an evolution if you will, for the genre it belongs to. Probably most of you never heard of it before, and those who have most likely underestimated it.
What the hell are you talking about?
I don't know why it's so rarely mentioned, let alone appreciated in public, but that's exactly what I'm here for, to draw your attention to this. Let me tell you about the most unacknowledged game of recent years. Let me tell you about Ghostrunner. First of all, I will explain what Ghostrunner actually is. The games you can compare it to in the slightest of ways are on the one hand hardcore platformers like Super Meat Boy or Celeste, and on the other hand, it shows some similarities with older non-Metroidvania action platformers, such as Shinobi, Castlevania, or Bloodstained: Curse of the Moon. But the obvious differences between all these games and Ghostrunner are the 3D environment and the first-person perspective. Since you seem to like pigeonhole things, you could categorize Ghostrunner as a 3D first-person action platformer. Try to say that 3 times in a row.
3D first-person action platformer. 3D first-person action platformer. 3D first-person action platformer.
But no mindless words or heartless definitions could ever do justice to the meaning and purpose that a game wants to express about itself. The developers often have a deeper intention behind what they want the player to experience and create the gameplay in such a way that this vision becomes clearly recognizable. Ghostrunner wants you to slip into a role. It gives you the opportunity to live out a hyper-realistic, larger-than-life fantasy, lets you step into the shoes of a ninja and witness the relentless action firsthand, right in front of your very eyes. That's what really defines the essence of this game. It turns you into an ultra-precise killing machine. It wants you to become the Ghostrunner. But this is no blunt power fantasy, no cheat code, no god mode. To really feel what it's like to surgically dismember enemies with the katana, you will need to earn the privilege of this sadistic pleasure. You have to learn to move like a ninja, run along walls, get over gaps between roofs, slide down shafts, swing into the air using your hook to reach the next platform with a skillful landing. You need to develop a constant awareness of your surroundings, whether there is an edge behind you to fall off or to find the next rail to grind over. You always need to know where you are and what's around you. Chaining your moves together to find the perfect line through the level feels a bit like a combo in a Tony Hawk game. Except your link between moves isn't a manual, but a dash. This maneuver is the reason why I made the comparison to the other platformers earlier, because this dash is what makes Ghostrunner so different compared to these other games. The first-person perspective and the third dimension allows you to move in a new way that opens up never-before-seen possibilities in terms of gameplay and level design. I know this doesn't sound that revolutionary when the big 3D evolution with Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time has been behind us for decades, but believe me, in this case, it feels fresh and new again. If you don't want to live in this unfulfilling nostalgic past where everything was better than these days, consider to subscribe to my channel, and I guarantee you I will keep you away from writing such nonsense on social media. So let me explain how the dash works. On the ground, it's exactly as you would imagine. You can make a quick leap in any direction and dodge a projectile at the last moment. But what makes the dash really unique in Ghostrunner are its numerous possibilities for use in mid-air. As long as you hold down the dedicated button on your controller after jumping, the game switches to a slow motion mode where you can move much faster than anything else around you. Also, the slow-mo allows you to navigate left and right mid-air. This lets you circle around the point you're looking at, which can be used to literally fly around an enemy or obstacle instead of dashing directly into your next step. In parkour, this could be utilized to correct your trajectory while jumping between vertical platforms, eliminating mistakes in the direction you took or pass around objects. The dash is the key gameplay feature, and everything you do in this game is centered around this ability. To further clarify why this is the case, I will now explain the challenges that you have to face in Ghostrunner. The gameplay loop generally consists of two different types of tasks or levels: parkour and slashing bad guys, whereby the first are rather straight paths that have to be passed. The second type of levels are mostly arenas full of merciless enemies who either shoot at you constantly or rush towards you unwaveringly. Often it's a mix between the two, and that's not just a good sign of variety in level design. It makes total sense why both level categories are mixed together right from the beginning. The game lets you combine the jumping and the slashing because it wants to make you realize as early as possible that if you can't handle the parkour, you have no chance in anything else. No matter what type of level you find yourself in, if you don't know how to react, you're going to have a bad time. And by that I mean dying. A lot of deaths. That's why the enemies are such a ruthless danger, literally firing another shot at you every 2 seconds, with incredible accuracy. Only equipped with a sword, you are a close quarters combat warrior, but the adversaries standing upon you attack from a distance. If they hit you once, you become a Schnitzel. But also vice versa. So your goal is to get close enough to reach the enemy unharmed and then cut him in half. Easier said than done when you are up against such a superior force, but this is where the dash comes into play, because by skillfully jumping and circling around your opponents, you can not only compensate for their advantage, but even turn it into a weakness.
I'm not a machine for you to test.
I don't think of you as a machine. I think of you as a killer.
As powerful as this tool sounds like, the challenges you have to overcome by using it may start easy in the beginning, but turn into harder and demanding encounters from there on out. But despite the fast pace of the game, in many cases you have to take your time to take a deep breath and concentrate. You have to learn the levels, to discover what possibilities they offer to you to complete your objective. If there isn't one of these protective orbs that you have to destroy in order to make certain invincible enemies vulnerable again, you are given absolute freedom as to how you want to approach your offense. After playing a few levels, slowly but surely everything is starting to click for you. You are realizing how the different types of opponents are working, what their weaknesses are, and how to predict them. You try to bait them into certain behaviors, because all of a sudden you can read their minds, just like you once thought they could. You begin to stride forward confidently in your metal cyborg skin, but you don't become presumptuous either, because every time you lose up too much respect for your opponents, they put you right back in your place. In the Japanese sense of honor, you earned the right to be proud of your capabilities. Nobody handed them over to you, no one. But you alone have worked hard to achieve this. Now you willingly allow yourself to be drawn deeper and deeper into this maelstrom, a gameplay loop so deep and fast that it pulls you off further and further into a vortex, until you fall into a violent trance. A meditative rush that sweeps you along a stream of inhumane acts of killing, when blood is running down your face and you annihilated everyone crossing your path. You know, the next ones will also fall victim to your katana, but not in a frenzy of barbaric violence, but in a dance of precise elimination. When you have attained this courage and felt the power associated with it for the first time, only then you finally understood what Ghostrunner really is. It is the gamification of Bushido, the way of the warrior, learning how to gain the force to do what needs to be done and holding onto it in responsibility to use it only and only for the greater good. Knowing how powerful you are makes you realize what danger you pose to the public, and you acknowledge that up until this point you have been nothing more than a puppet, a willless pawn executing the orders of the wrong side. You defy your authority and challenge the Keymaster to a duel. She rules authoritatively over the last remaining humans on Earth, locked up in Dharma Tower. You fail the attempt to strike her down and get thrown off the tower all the way down to the bottom. Reassembled by the Climbers, a rebel group opposing Moira the Keymaster, and awakened by the architect of Dharma Tower. You are guided through the story with the old-fashioned style of angel and devil on your shoulder dialogue.
This is Zoe Avila of the Climbers Rebellion. If there's anybody alive out there, please respond.
This is Ghostrunner.
The young rebel Zoe is in desperate need for support, because alone, separated from the rest of her group, she can't do anything against the superior power of the Key Henchmen.
Keys?
The Keymaster Guard.
And is therefore unable to save the citizens of Dharma Tower all by herself. You don't know whether you want to help her because you are becoming more and more aware of your guilty conscience regarding your own atrocities, or because you are suddenly able to distinguish right from wrong.
They're planning to shut down the sector's air filters.
What will that do?
Thousands of innocent civilians will die.
Which way to the filters?
Thank you.
You just know that something has to be done quickly, because otherwise people will die. You are capable of saving them, and that's why you see it as your duty. There's already enough innocent blood on your hydraulic hands. You know that you are in part responsible for their fate. You stay in constant contact with Zoe so that you can keep up with the current situation. She tells you how things used to be, how hard it was for her to grow up under the oppression of the Keys.
I wonder what it was like to live in the old world. I've heard stories, but I don't know what's true and what isn't. No one does. I mean, how could they? My grandparents were still kids when the gates closed. No human has been outside since.
It is fascinating to sense how the long-gone stories of a free and peaceful past give her confidence and hope for a better future. She tells you how things really got out of hand when Moira and the architect, who once created and managed the Dharma Tower together, suddenly found themselves fighting each other for its supremacy.
How did she manage to win?
I was stabbed in the back, but Mara had her own plan. She became the sole ruler of Dharma Tower.
But what Zoe is not aware of is that this very architect is constantly whispering into your other ear, deconstructing everything she says and arguing against it.
Why you believe she can be of help is beyond me.
She wants to fight.
It takes more than that to be useful.
He manages to manipulate you, to question your eagerness to help, because he and you have a common goal: to kill Moira.
Soon we'll climb back up to Dharma City. Set humanity back on its path.
What path is that?
One free from Mara and her reign of terror. One where humanity thrives, not fades away.
I need more answers.
And you will get them. For now, trust me, the Keymaster is your enemy and a tyrant.
You know he's right when he claims that there's no one left to save if you don't do something about the Keymaster as soon as possible.
You don't have time to worry about one sector's dwindling population.
You want them to die?
You're missing the bigger picture here. Sometimes sacrifices are necessary for the greater good.
You know he's telling the truth, albeit out of false ambition. But you have to play by his rules, because otherwise, without his help, you wouldn't be able to get back to the top of the tower. Defeating Moira is of the highest priority.
Wake the f up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
I prefer the more linear type of storytelling. I like quiet and atmospheric scenes with intimate dialogues and gripping moments of drama. But if a game like God of War manages to reconcile cinematic action cutscenes with a deeper emotional story by skillfully breaking quiet moments of tension with an explosive blow, then of course that's what I like the most. I want the writers to slap their vision of the story right in front of my face without beating around the bush. For narrative-driven action adventures, it's ideal to have these quiet moments in between sections of gameplay where you can listen to the dialogues. These are the parts where the characters talk about things that don't advance the plot. We get to know more about their personalities, and they reveal further details about the world. During this time, our only active focus is on navigating the protagonist through a level. Therefore, we are able to passively absorb such information. I really loved the story in Ghostrunner, but unfortunately, the entire narrative of Ghostrunner is told via these in-game dialogues. No cutscenes, only voiceovers.
Luckily, it should come to you naturally. You were born of machine as much as of flesh.
Exclusively relying on this one particular style of storytelling wouldn't be the worst, since the voice actors did an exceptionally good performance. No, the difficulty in following these endless amounts of conversations is attributed to the gameplay demands that hinder us from finding the calm and concentration to really listen. There isn't enough time to digest what's being said, since you have to climb the next parkour section immediately. To fully absorb the spoken dialogue, you really have to take your time to pause and listen attentively between two parts of action. And it's really worth listening carefully because Ghostrunner raises important questions about topics like AI, oppression, free will, and the existence of life itself. It doesn't answer those questions, but it gives you something to think about after putting down the controller. I admit it can be rough, especially for those like me whose first language isn't English. The developers at one more level must have been likely aware of this issue, since they are based in Poland and aren't native English speakers either. But they have to address this in the sequel, right? And now, finally, I have come to the point where I can mention the recently released Ghostrunner 2. And I want to talk about the most important differences between the first installment and the second. But let us stick to the story for a moment. Has Ghostrunner 2 more deep and intellectual things to say than its predecessor? No, not really. But it expands on its lore in very interesting ways. And most importantly, it knows how to tell you about it. This is such a great example to see how developers can learn from their mistakes just from one game to another. Now everything gets the time it deserves. In between missions, you will come to the Climbers headquarters, where you will have a chance to talk to all your new allies face to face. With this little hub, the devs have managed to create a cozy place to wind down, where your blood pressure cools off from all the action and you can fully immerse yourself in the story. Each of the NPCs has its own private area, which is divided into a living and working area, not only revealing more about their personality, but also reflecting their position and role within the group.
Have you ever seen him go?
No. Maybe he's got a shy bladder.
A killer cyborg with a shy bladder. Do you hear yourself?
These rooms are bursting with detail. This kind of environmental storytelling is what breathes life into this hub and makes you feel excited each time you return. Here you will meet Zoe for the first time, learn about her passion for tinkering and how she relates to the other members of the Climbers. You will also have a lot of time listening to the endless chatter of the NPCs while you are on your motorcycle. And yes, to get this out of the way before I start talking about the really important gameplay elements, there are motorcycle sections in Ghostrunner 2. You ride along walls and through tunnels, jumping over ramps and occasionally shooting down annoying vermin that block your path. Just as spectacular as quickly worn out is the move in which you push yourself off from the vehicle to avoid a deadly laser and then immediately pull yourself back towards it, so that the bike doesn't drive away by itself, leaving you tossed and turned in the desert winds looking like a fool. The linear sections that have to be completed on two wheels are the equivalent to the pure platforming chapters of the first game, except that compared to levels like the train, the focus is more on quick reflexes than memorization. Unfortunately, none of the sequel's riding sequences come close to the nerve-wracking, adrenaline-charged feeling of relief and pride that you feel when finally reaching the top of the gatekeeper after countless attempts.
Wow, watching from your perspective, I nearly p***ed myself. I'm betting being there in person was 1,000 times worse.
Yes.
But for this you can't just blame the spongy and overly sensitive controls of your bike, which, to make matters worse, gets stuck at every little corner. No, this qualitative discrepancy can most likely be explained by the simpler design of these levels, which requires the player to behave rather reactive than rehearsed. Which of these two approaches falls more into the trial and error category may be subjective, but the latter rather gives me the feeling of having pulled off a cool show.
What a mess.
Nevertheless, I still enjoyed this later part of Ghostrunner 2 because my reason for being able to accept the flaws of the motorcycle shenanigans comes from the fact that this part of the campaign is a huge enrichment to the overall gaming experience you will have in terms of world building and atmosphere. After 1.5 games, you have already spent so long delving into this world and familiarizing yourself with this place that being able to get a glimpse outside the box can really give you goosebumps. You have become so accustomed to Dharma Tower, knowing how it feels, how each of its parts fit together. Leaving it for the first time is like letting go a piece of home. Yet crossing these dusty landscapes is like entering a new world, a lonely adventure in a dead and empty territory. I won't reveal any more at this point, just remember, the bike gets stuck in the rock. But there are still a few notable aspects in which Ghostrunner 2 has consistently improved on its predecessor. First and foremost, the special abilities. In GR1, I never really got the impression that I should rely on them. They had too long recharge times and just didn't seem that useful to me. The more I returned to the game, the more ways I found to use them, but in the end, they still weren't cool. You have them as a nice little extra, but you can still beat the whole game while just ignoring them entirely. Fortunately, this has changed for the better with the second installment. GR2 gives you a few new tools to make your ninja godlike experience that much more intense during battle. Most importantly, the special abilities are way more useful now. They are available for every enemy encounter and can even be used multiple times. This makes it worthwhile to include them in your strategy for the next battle in advance. The only returner is Tempest, who pushes enemies away, but this is not deadly as long as they don't fall into an abyss. The Shuriken already existed in the previous game, but only as a temporary item and only in certain areas that were specifically designed around their utilization. Now that you have them as a permanent part of your repertoire, you are no longer a pure short-range fighter, but you have to use the Shuriken and all the other abilities strategically and carefully, because you can run out of them quickly. Smaller enemies can instantly be killed with the Shuriken. Larger ones can be stunned with it. Now use your grappling hook to pull yourself directly towards their faces, instead of laboriously approaching them on foot. Last but not least, we have the Ninja Phantom. You can create a doppelganger of yourself, which for a brief moment, what am I telling you here? As if you don't know what a doppelganger does. If used correctly, you can use the time window in which you are invisible to get a free kill, which can be exploited immensely by the player to simplify some tricky stages that he struggles with, but not as some kind of easy mode. You still have to strategize about when and where to use it, to your personal benefit, but you also get an ultimate in Ghostrunner 2 that you can use once per fight, like for example slowing down time for a brief moment, which could easily be misused to slash through a couple of adversaries with no effort. I used this just a few times in the areas I personally struggled the most with, and never saw a reason to use this power anywhere else. I know this create your own difficulty thing was heavily discussed with Elden Ring regarding the Ash summonings, but I think every player should be responsible enough to make the decision what's best for him or herself. But yeah, let's be honest, sadly most of the people seem incapable to do so. However, with the new block and parry ability, they really rock the boat. In the beginning, it's only useful to protect you from projectiles, but as soon as you activate the passive skills, which make parrying extremely easy, and the one that makes the bullets fly back to where they came from, enemies equipped with firearms become a triviality.
You ever get tired?
Not really, no.
Oh,
But I don't think that's a bad thing, because being able to reflect bullets with your katana is such a cool ninja thing to be able to do, which again really adds to the power fantasy that this game is trying to convey. All of these abilities ensure that you never do the same thing too often, constantly be able to try out new things and have enough variety in stuff to use to find your own playstyle. To come to a final verdict at this point, I must of course concede that neither of the two Ghostrunner games is perfect. Of course not. Nothing is absolutely perfect. Not even the best games I've ever played can claim to be. But it was important for me to show you how different these two games feel compared to anything else you will find on the video game market. There is no comparable experience. I wanted to show you that the developers only succeeded in conveying the exact feeling they were aiming for by embedding it into the gameplay and atmosphere from the ground up. I don't know which part I like better. Ghostrunner 1 is perhaps the more raw and unforgiving hardcore experience of the two, but part 2 goes even further in making you feel like a superhero. And maybe it does even a better job at this than superhero games such as Batman Arkham City or Marvel's Spider-Man. I made a comparison video about these two games that you can check out after this one if you like. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell. You know the drill. I could go on for hours about what else these two masterpieces have to offer. The artistic direction of the level art style is mesmerizing beyond belief, capturing the cyberpunk atmosphere perfectly and conjuring up some of the most abstract imagery I've ever seen in the genre. The graphics are so well and interestingly designed, both from an artistic point of view, which really breathes life into the whole thing, but also from a technical perspective, which would be worth of its own analysis. The soundtrack backs this up with a lightning strike of synthwave tracks that really pack a punch. While the OST of GR1 has more hit-orientated bangers in store, the second part very skillfully finds the balance between atmospheric sounds that build up the mood and fat riffs that will make you dance non-stop. But be sure that these flattering words are not enough to fully appreciate the genius of these soundtracks. They will soak you up into the action like no other music did before. In my opinion, the Ghostrunner games are some of the most unique experiences I've ever played. Part 2 really stands out from the rest of games released in 2023, even compared to titles like From Software's Armored Core 6 or the Resident Evil 4 remake. And all I wish for Ghostrunner 2 is a little more recognition, because I think it was the most unacknowledged game last year.